Hello, everyone. Michael Reeder, CPA here, owner of Reeder CPA Group. There's different schools of thought when the great debate when it comes to entity structure and funding strategy for my business investment. I call this the great debate between, on one side, do I leverage debt, right, an SBA loan or another conventional bank loan? Do I leverage debt, or do I put my assets at risk, right? I don't want to take on debt. I want to just dip into my cash, and I want to dip into my equity and fund my business that way. So the great debate is: do I invest in my business with a leverage debt strategy, or by dipping into my nest egg with my own equity? So as a CPA with a niche in the franchise industry, what I do all day, every day, 12 months out of the year, is I talk to business buyers that are interested in buying a business. They're interested in buying a franchise. And so as a CPA, I have a network of franchise consultants that refer me their business buyers. And, in order to talk about entity structure strategy, funding strategy, tax strategy for small business owners, item 19 of the FDD, pro formas for their financial projections, they may need it for their SBA loan, et cetera. But the thing that I talk about the most with business buyers on these CPA consultation calls is, how do I structure my business, Mike? How do I fund it? And I call this the great debate because it really comes down to, do I take on debt or do I dip into my cash? And when I say dip into my cash, I can also mean, dipping into my retirement funds, dipping into my assets. There are the human element of this great debate is very important, because there can be times when it makes so much more sense for someone to buy a business with a leveraged debt strategy. But they might have had some sort of traumatic experience with debt, either as a child, seeing their parents struggle with debt, having to file bankruptcy, or go through a foreclosure, or a business failure, and having to witness that as a child, or maybe having a grandparent that went through the Great Depression, and so that played a role. That made debt like a very taboo thing in the household for your parents, and that's how your parents were raised, and that's how they made you raise. So there are people that no matter what, they hate the D word, and so that has to be taken into consideration when having this conversation with people that are looking to buy a business, because even if it makes perfect sense on paper, we don't live on paper. We live in the real world. We are emotional creatures. And, there are certain, certain people have certain triggers. And so that has to be accounted for. It may make perfect sense on paper for someone, for person A to buy their business with an SBA loan, which would require, let's say, a 20% down payment, a 20% capital injection, and 80% of the investment gets funded by a third-party SBA loan. And they can structure as an LLC, and they can have that, that startup loss get reported on their personal tax return, where it can offset their 6 or 7 figure W-2 income. Can make all the sense in the world, but that person will not do it because it's debt. And so that has to be respected, when having this conversation with someone. So where am I? So I am in the school, on this great debate, I personally, right, this is just me. I am on the side of, I would rather leverage debt for my business purchase. I would rather invest in my business with a third-party leverage debt strategy as opposed to dipping into my nest egg. And it gets back, and it's the same thing with real estate. And I think that one reason why, the fast track to wealth, is investments in small businesses and real estate. And what do those two things have in common? What they don't have in common are the tax write-off benefits, because there's more restrictions on the real estate side of things on the tax code versus owning a small business which you actively participate in. Right? If you own a business which you actively participate in, and you have startup losses, those are always going to be ordinary. They're always going to be deductible to the extent of basis against other income on your personal tax return, whether it be your W-2 from your day job or your spouse's W-2 from his or her day job, or your military pension or your other pension or your rental income after depreciation or your interest, dividend, capital gain rate, your portfolio income. Ordinary losses are always ordinary business losses, right? Non-passive business losses, from a business that you're actively involved in are always going to be deductible. You're not going to run into that with real estate. In order for your real estate losses, it depends if you're classified as a real estate investor or a real estate professional for tax purposes. Is the short-term rental loophole at play? Like these are things that are going to determine if your rental, like if you have a rental loss, right? Or potentially a big rental loss if you do like a cost segregation study. What's going to that loss might be a passive loss. It might only deduct. It might only offset passive income versus non-passive income unless you're a real estate professional or there's a short-term rental loophole at play. So there's more restrictions there. But what they do have in common, what small business ownership and real estate have in common, is that you can scale them with a leverage strategy, right? A small business, you can get an SBA loan. And one of the great things about investing in a franchise is that so many franchise brands out there are on the SBA's approved franchise list, which means that the SBA will loan to a startup business if it's a franchise business. Depending on, they if there's real estate involved, they might be able to do a 504 and thus put 10% down on the real estate piece. More often than not, they're going to have to put 20% down capital injection. If it's an emerging brand, they might have to have more post-closing liquidity, which would, essentially mean more than 25% all in. But there's a leverage strategy there, just like there's pretty much unless someone is just swimming in cash, if you got like Elon Musk, who just had like a bunch of cash laying around after he liquidated 10% of his Tesla stock on that vote that he did on Twitter. He had all this cash laying around, and he just didn't know what to do with it, so he just bought Twitter. That was a funny story, but it's like we're all but that doesn't apply to us. Most of us, little fish out here, when comparing ourselves to Elon Musk, you're not going to go buy that piece of investment property with all cash. You're going to get a mortgage on it, right? And so it's essentially, in the world of small business, you're doing the same thing with an SBA loan. You're essentially, leveraging, 80 or 70% of the total investment with a small business loan. Some banks are more aggressive than others, and some banks, because the SBA guarantees a portion of the note. Some banks are more aggressive than others and will do, SBA loans for startup businesses that are non-franchised. They're going to require more of an in-depth business plan. Interest rates might be a little higher. Down payment might be a little bit higher. But I'm talking about in the context of franchises here because, the SBA is a real great program. Of course, you can always, the leverage strategy can always, it can go beyond just the SBA. It can just be a conventional bank loan. It could also be a leverage strategy with leveraging your personal assets. If you have equity in real estate, you can do a home equity line of credit or some other real estate line of credit on your investment properties. You can, if you have a bunch of non-qualified investment assets, you could do a securities-backed line of credit, right? So you can leverage your assets as opposed to depleting your assets in order to invest in your small business. And so, and the reason why this is an accelerant is because it allows you to preserve your cash position. It allows you to preserve your nest egg. Only put 20 or 30% equity injection into the business instead of 100% of the investment being equity, and thus you preserve your nest egg. The 70% that you didn't, the 80 or 70% that you didn't invest in the business, you can keep it over here, and you can keep it invested in other investments. Maybe more conservative. Whatever your appetite for risk is, you can have that over there. Preserve your nest egg. Meanwhile, you're over here, and you have you leverage your business investment with an SBA loan. And yeah, you're paying interest, but you're writing off that interest. You're writing off that interest as a business expense. So I always tell people, hey, a big part. So I like to call it the debt strategy, strategic use of good debt. Understanding strategic use of good debt. And when I explain this to people, I do have some converts, right? I do convert that person who hates debt, and I get them to understand, the difference between bad debt, right? Like, high interest personal credit card debt, And sometimes, mortgage interest, that could be bad debt as well, especially if you're taking the standard deduction on your personal taxes, which is actually, that's something to talk about, because with the sunsetting rules coming up in 2025, at the end of 2025, the standard deduction will go back down to what it was pre-Trump's tax reform. But strategic use of good debt. Okay, in my opinion, as a CPA, as an entrepreneurial CPA who works with a lot of business owners, so this is something that I know a little thing or two about. An SBA loan interest is interest that an SBA loan is good debt, because it's a loan that you're taking to invest in a business that's going to produce a profit, and that profit percentage is going to be greater than the interest that you're paying on the debt, and the interest that you're paying on the debt is tax deductible fully. So I always tell people, if it's good, a main characteristic of good debt is you're able to write it off for income tax purposes as a business expense, which implies that for every dollar of interest that let's just use a simplistic example, for every dollar of interest that you pay, you're saving 30 cents in taxes, and depending on what state you're in, maybe 35%, federal and state all in. And so just for simplicity purposes, whatever the interest rate is, convert that to like a dollar amount of interest paid throughout the year. It's like I paid $15,000. I paid $16,000 of I paid $15,000 of interest throughout the year. I paid $15,000 of interest throughout the year. Okay, but the true economic effect of that was really only $10,000 of interest, because you only paid 2/3 of that, right? Because for every dollar of interest, you saved 33 cents in taxes, high level. So did you pay $15,000 of interest, or when you take tax savings into consideration, did you was the true it was still $15,000 of interest, but the net economic effect on your personal financial statement was only a $10,000, because there was also a $5,000 tax savings due to the writing off of the interest. That's good debt. Again, that interest is going towards an investment that is going that is going to produce a profit, and that profit is going to be a percentage greater than what that it's going to be a higher percentage than what the percentage is that you're paying as interest on the SBA loan. And so that's a huge component of of the leverage strategy, is understanding that, the tax benefits. And then, the leverage strategy, it's all like I always think about it like this. The loan gives you, as the entrepreneur, the loan gives you, as the business owner, it gives you air cover. Right? So I'll make a military analogy here. It's like you've got the drones up in the sky that are, like looking out for the troops on the ground. You're the troops on the ground. And what are you doing in your day to day? Like if you're just waking up, if you're there was a gentleman who I respect a lot in the franchise space. His name is Carl Morningstar, the managing partner of the U Network. Shout out to Carl Morningstar. He made a great post. I'm recording this content. I'm recording this session right now on June 21st of 2024. So Carl Morningstar dropped and we're going to microclip this for Carl. Shout out to Carl. Carl Morningstar made a post on LinkedIn the other day here in June of 24. And it's like, here are 3 things to do if you want to be poor. And first one was like, I can't remember, like I don't remember them what they were in order, but like one of them was just like, sit on the couch all day and watch Netflix. And the other one was like, spend a bunch of money on fancy watches. I forgot what the third one was, but and then he was just like, and it's like, if you want to stay poor, don't follow me, right? Because like Carl, very successful in the franchise industry on the throughout his career on the franchisee side, and as a consultant, doing great things with the U Network. But so he's all about making money. But that post that he made is relevant to what I'm explaining here about, what are you doing in your day to day? It's like, okay, you got approved for the SBA loan. Great. You owe that money back. Shit, that's scary, right? I think we can drop the S word. Okay. Now, what are you going to do in your day to day? Are you going to wake up, focus on your business? Do you have a routine? Are you spending X amount of hours in deep focus work, working on your business and working in your business? What are you delegating? Do you have standard operating procedures? Are you training your team? Are you watering the garden of sales? It's like, what is your sale? Like, is your sale, like, are you your sales team, or do you have someone on your team that's doing sales? Is your sales process optimized? Is do you have standard operating procedures for your employees? Do they know what to do when they come to work every day? What's the production, the production, component of your, however the sausage is made at your business. If you're making widgets, if you're selling a service, the production of that service, is the production, like the operation of the firm, is that optimized? Do you have a marketing strategy in place? Are you keeping the pipeline full? Do you have someone like Ben Engel from Northern Creative? Shout out to Ben Engel. He's my marketing guy over at Reader CPA Group. He's awesome. He's listening to this right now. I love you, Ben. It's like, what are you doing in your day-to-day as a business owner? Because if you have a loan, that loan, you're going to have to pay it back one day. You don't have to pay it back tomorrow. It's expected, especially if you're starting a business from scratch. Okay, if you're starting a business from scratch, let me just get into a deep thought here. Let me just if you're starting a business from scratch, you're going to have a loss to start. And that's expected because you're starting with revenue from zero. And then for tax purposes, you have the accelerated depreciation of fixed assets, such as machinery, equipment, furniture, vehicles, etc. And so it's expected that you're going to start out at a negative cash flow, which is perfectly fine for a startup business. But you're going to have a profit eventually. And so how do you accelerate, and so you can't just, if you're never going to have a profit, that's a problem. And so it's all about, strategic use of good debt, understanding, like how, like why is it good debt? Because of the tax benefits of the interest, and what is that debt going towards? The production of a profitable business, as opposed to some sweatshirts at the mall that you're going to wear on Christmas and then never wear again. But at least you'll give them to the Salvation Army or Goodwill, and so someone will get them. So that's good. But that. But then, like, the huge thing is just like, it gives you air cover so you can build the gosh darn business ASAP. It's not going to happen overnight, but so like within a couple of years, you've achieved break even and profitability, and now you have enough profitability to service the debt, and then you have enough profitability to service the debt and then some, right? Then you have enough profitability to reinvest in the business and to take a salary, right? And all of this, you're increasing, you've successfully leveraged the debt in order to increase the value of your business. And now your business is producing a profit. You're able to reinvest. You're able to take more money out of it. And meanwhile, that's 70 or 80% that you would have otherwise dipped into if you went directly into, I'm going to deplete my assets instead of use a leverage strategy. Like, that money is still preserved, and it's probably grown incrementally depending on what you have it invested in. And so that's another big component of this all is understanding that dipping into your assets, right? Dipping into your nest egg, that's always going to be there, right? And that's interesting. Like, a lot of banks, offer like an SBA startup loan, and then once you're in business, it's harder to get the SBA loan. You have to show some, again, you might work with some more aggressive banks that'll charge more on the interest. But if you there is kind of like a, use it or lose it, element of it all, because the SBA has these startup loans, startup 7A loans for franchises. But then once you're in business, then you have to show a profit for a couple of years and enough profit to cover the debt service, for two, so it's like, it's harder to get the SBA loan once you're already in business as opposed to starting from scratch. And so there, it's like, well, the whole other people's money, right? Like, other people in the context of the SBA and banks. Like in this context, like, the SBA like has like this great product for you to use as a startup business. Why not take advantage of it? Because then if you don't take advantage of it, and then you find yourself like 9 months down the road, you need capital, it's not going to be so easy to get it. Okay. So take it while you got it. Right. And like, oh, by the way, that nest egg that you have that you're trying to preserve, like, it's always going to be there as plan B. Why does the nest egg have to be plan A? Like, the nest egg can be plan B, right? Like, if shit hits the fan and you need to, and let's be real, right? Like, one of the many great things about America is that there are laws in place that protect people that throw their hat in the ring as business owners. And so it's like I would be bullshitting you today if I were to say everyone is going to be successful, right? Like a big, huge purpose of what a big, part of my, a huge mission of mine is to do whatever I can do to help mitigate risk. Um, is to help mitigate risk for business owners and to increase their chance of being successful with the advice I give, right? You know, but I'm not CPA Jesus, right? Like there are going to be people that fail. It's just like, and so like there are people that, like, so there are bankruptcy law, there are laws in this country that allow people to throw their hat in the ring as an entrepreneur. And if it doesn't work out, their life is not going to be destroyed. If shit hits the fan with the business, and then you're going to have to dip into your nest egg to pay off the loan. Okay, so it's like let's say that you don't, like, you have enough of a nest egg to not file bankruptcy if you fail, right? Well, then plan B, bring in your nest egg to pay off the loan and move on with your life, right? Because in that hypothetical right there, if you were to invest with your nest egg as plan A and you fail, then it's just like the same thing, right? But at least you gave yourself a shot and you gave it a good faith effort. And and if you're depending on, like, if you just like listen, if you just tune into like what I'm saying, into this rant right now that I'm saying, like it's like, and you don't have full context of what I'm saying, it's easy. Like, is Mike saying like, hey, if you fail, it's like go into business and fail, and who cares? You can file a bankruptcy. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I'm going on the extreme, like the extreme worst case example, like for some reason, some act of God or something in your personal life happens, or some crazy thing with the business happened that, was completely, like, whatever it is. And like extreme example here, like, and you fail, then depleting your nest egg to pay off the debt is always going to be there as a plan B. And then like worst case, there are these things called, it's like, so there is life after a failed business. And that's one of the great things about this country. But that's not why we're here, right? Like, but we have to talk about that because, again, it would be a disservice to anyone out there to think that, like, investing in a business is a guaranteed thing. It's not. Like, you can fail. And, one of the things that you do to mitigate risk and to decrease the chance of failure is to surround yourself with a team of advisors, right? A CPA like myself and Reader CPA Group, some great attorneys out there, both franchise attorneys and business attorneys, right? A good banker, a good financial advisor, a good insurance agent, et cetera. Have a team of advisors, right? And don't try to do everything yourself. Read the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. That's a great book that any business owner should read because it's pretty much all about just like how you have to give rise to your inner entrepreneur and inner manager and suppress your inner technician, build a team, delegate, etc. But when it comes down to it, you can tell I lean towards the strat. If I, like, in the great debate of, I'm going to invest in a business. Should I do it by taking out a loan, or should I do it by dipping into my nest egg and just paying for it cash? I lean towards taking out a loan for the reasons mentioned. Okay. Strategic use of good debt. The tax code is written for the self-employed. Taking advantage of the startup losses to offset other income on the personal tax return. Having that debt of 70 to 80% of the initial investment, have that preserve your nest egg, what would otherwise be put at risk, and use that debt as air cover for you to build a business. The biggest thing, the biggest key, it's good to know about the good debt versus bad debt, and like the tax deductibility of business interest on an SBA loan. All that stuff is good to know, but the biggest determining factor of your business being successful, if you got day one, you invest in the business, you got an SBA, you had to put 30% down or 20% down, 10% down, whatever, and the SBA loan comes in for the rest of it on day one. Okay, you wake up on day two. What are you doing? What are you doing on day two? Hey, guess what? You might have to work on the weekends. Like, you might have to work during the weekends during startup phase of your business. Like, welcome to the world. Okay. Like, that's the short-term price that you might have to pay in order for a long-term prosperity of, like, short-term of doing what a lot of people don't want to do in exchange for a long-term of living a life that most people can't live. Right. It's like, surviving ramp up is not supposed to be rainbows and butterflies. Right. It's like, what are you doing in your day? It's like, like, you should take time. You should take time, not just every weekend, but you should take time every day to just unplug from work. For example, like Monday through Thursday for me, like for better or for worse, like as a I'm an owner operator of my CPA firm. I work a ton. I love what I do. Um, Monday through Thursday for me, I work. Um, and this is we can like document this. I'm 37 years old right now. It's like maybe when I'm like 45 years old, like maybe I'm more leveraged and stuff. But it's like real. Like I work. I work 14 to 16 hours a day. Um, and I would say it's a combination of because I want to and I have to. But it's the I have to because I have such an extreme drive. And so, doing that, and I'm not saying that everyone has to do that. If you want to listen to, I want to work 6 hours a week. I want to have a lifestyle business. Okay. But when you hear a lot of people say that, they're either, a lot of them are, how do you say it? Like they're exceptions to the rule. And also a lot of them, there's a lot of the story that you haven't heard. And also a lot of them went through a lot of grinding before they got to the, and a lot of learning and a lot of making mistakes before they got to the point where they can actually have more balance in their life. That's why I like when Jeff Bezos says it's work-life harmony, not work-life balance, because, what is balance to person A versus person B and C? It's like, it's very subjective. So that's why I like harmony. It's like whatever works for you. Like one reason why I work like a mad dog Monday through Thursday is because I love what I do. I love the rush. And then I also love to, like honestly, like I'll work like, 4 or 5 hours on a Friday, and I'll work like maybe like 3 hours on a Saturday and like 2 hours on a Sunday, so you always want to find time to like, within the 24-hour cycle to like take a little break and breathe, eat lunch, eat dinner, whatever, walk around, fitness, cold shower. Cold showers, by the way, huge daily routine hack for energy. Also espresso. But it's just like my biggest, because like I don't just talk the talk. I walk the walk, and so like I'm documenting like my experience as a business owner. And the biggest key to a successful strategy of strategic use of good debt is what you do in your day-to-day, right? Because like as Carl Morningstar's post, right, if you get an SBA loan on day one, and then on day two through day 100 you're just like sitting on the couch like watching Netflix and like stressing out and like complaining because you don't know what to do, and you're stressed out, and it was much easier, like you hate the corporate world, but at the same time it's like you like the corporate world because it had like that structure, and you were, it was the corporation's money, it wasn't your money at risk, so it was like whatever. And like you were, it's just like, like you will fail, you will default on your SBA loan and you'll have problems. But if you view that SBA loan as air cover for you to, in your day to day execute, build the business, work on the business, work in the business. And let's be real, every day you're working both on the business and in the business. You're never just, forget this. I want to work on my business, not work in it. You're always doing both. Okay. Again, unless you're an exception to the rule, or you're, you've put in 15 or 20 years or more of grind work, so, and now you've learned, and you've built a team, etc. So that is like I lean in the great debate of, do I invest in my business via a leverage strategy with debt or by dipping into my nest egg? I lean towards preserving my nest egg and actually going the route of debt, strategic use of good debt. And in order for that to be a successful strategy, what's attached at the hip with it is you have to have a disciplined day-to-day as a business owner in order to grow your business. And that debt, that SBA loan will give you air cover to do it. But if you don't do your part, then you will fail, and you'll owe money, and that's the risk. And so it's on you. All right, everyone. Michael Reeder CPA Group. Tune in next time.